Hello, while I'm doing a series looking at Kircher, I thought I might have a look at something a little bit different, and that's the story of Atlantis, because there's a connection in here now. In one of his books, Mundi Subterranean, the Subterranean World. This is the cover sheet, but it's interesting. Well, again, with it, so we have Hermes wearing the hat, carrying the caduceus, the sun god Apollo. We see Artemis, and this is a pretty much a replica of a statue of Artemis from the Temple of Artemis, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. And then we get reference to the Cyclops typo. There should be Hephaestus, and or Vulcan, the metallurgical god. Geometry, symbols, measures in there, Orpheus. But in the subterranean world, well, this goes back quite some time, and so like one of his illustrations, well, he was also looking into geology, and so again you can see how he's talking about, well, the volcanoes and the origins and the molten core, which is an interesting thing and probably a little bit ahead of the curve for what people would expect from that time. Standard symbols in especially legislative buildings, you'll find the same in US Capitol building. This is a legislative building in Winnipeg, the Manitoba capital. And what we have is the horn Moses, giver of law. And we also have Solon. And Solon's important to the Atlantis story because his ancestors his ancestors through Egyptian priests learnt about the Atlantis story as is most commonly known now. So it come down through Solon to Plato, and Plato is sort of the last part, and this is how we get the Atlantis story. But this is a illustration from Kircher, and so Atlantis, Egypt as as the description of Plato, which come down through Egypt. Now you see America there, Africa or Hispania, Europe, so on that side, and Oceanus Atlantic, so the Atlantic Ocean as in Atlantis. Now he has Atlantis in his drawing really, really big in there. But if we flip it upside down, now we can so there we can see the African coast, Spain and Portugal, and the Americas there. Now, let me refresh that. Okay, so back to Kircher and his description of Atlantis. Now, earthquakes, as like for instance the Japanese and the Indonesian tsunami, and then another form of tsunami is the impact, like a comet asteroid striking the Earth, which would create. They're probably going to be the biggest tsunami. So the tsunamis created by an earthquake, the smaller of these massive natural disasters, and we have the largest. However, so again, this is from Kircher's Mundi, from the Subterranean World. Pliny tells us that in his time, the mountain Cibotus, with the town of Curites, which flood on its side, were wholly absorbed into the earth. So a town was absorbed into the earth, so that not the least trace of either remained. He records that the like fate of the city of Tantalus in Magnesia, and after it the mountain Sipylus, both thus absorbed into a violent opening of the earth. Galanus and Galames, towns once famous in Phoenicia, so the North African coast, or basically Libya area, but there were other Phoenician colonies around. But these two towns are recorded to have shared the same fate, and the vast promontory called Phegium in Ethiopia, after a violent earthquake in the night time, was not to be seen in the morning, the whole having disappeared and the earth having closed over it. These and many other histories, attested by authors of the greatest credit among the ancients, abundantly prove the fact in the earlier ages. There have not been wanting too many instances of more modern date. In some recent, I think it was in Turkey, maybe about 20 years ago, there was an earthquake and a portion of the land fell into the sea. This is not unusual after the Indonesian earthquake along a 2,000-mile stretch. these islands, part of them had tilted upwards, and the reef was now above the sea level. The same thing happens in New Zealand. There was a coast road, and now the coast road is several hundred feet in from the coast, because as these, sometimes the land falls into the sea, sometimes it lifts above the sea, and in our recorded modern times, this does happen. But and for instance, a Japanese earthquake shifted the whole island chain of Japan a few feet over back towards China. So these things do happen, and they're describing similar events back in these times. Now, why I bring this up, because we have so where Atlantis would be, as by this description of Kircher, which he gets from Plato. However, if we look, there's no actual sort of meaningless. Now we have a few other places in there that could sort of possibly fit. The Azores Islands, but the Cape Verde Islands and the Canary Islands, so Cape Verde Islands and the Canary Islands. Now, I think it's especially the Canary Islands, there's a volcano there. So they're giant waves, but created by earthquakes such as the Japanese or the Indonesian tsunami are small in compared to a cosmic impact. However, in between that, without a cosmic impact, the biggest tsunamis that we're going to get are from collapses especially of volcanoes. Now, so there's these volcanoes here. Now, once there's a landslip and it goes into the ocean, for instance, I think it was in Alaska, the biggest tsunami wave was ever found, and that was because the side of a mountain collapsed into a fjord. And so it's these landslips that create, at least terrestrially speaking, the greatest of these tsunamis. And I'll put the links into the description, because there's a channel called Ingomar 200, and he does some, wish he added sound, but anyway, he does a lot of these analyses of these. So the La Palma mega tsunami, so in the Canary Islands, in the past it's happened, and it's going to happen again soon, and North America, the East Coast, and well, they're going to get hit by a big tsunami, bigger than what the earthquakes such as Japan or Indonesia created. But you also have Cape Verde, which has the same theme. So now the flood which destroyed Atlantis, again, I'm just proposing these things here because there is some really good geological evidence. I'll put these in the description. Or the Fogo landslip off Cape Verde Islands, and so these go back quite some time, but other ones in between, and will happen again. And it's actually these landslips. So it was half the mountain fell in, even in what's that lake in Arizona there? Well, anyway, I forget the name of it now. But so it's these tsunamis, which are even bigger than the ones created by earthquakes and just your standard volcano exploding. It's the landslip that goes in here. Here in Sydney, we get struck by big tsunamis every once in a while because part of a continental shelf collapses into the ocean, creating these. And so even at the foot of the Blue Mountains, we find seashells. And so these things happen, and it's not the earthquakes that are really the biggest threat. It's these landslips, and they create massive tsunamis. So I'll put those links in the description. I'm not sort of pushing one thing either way, but just as a possibility. So whether it was the Canary Islands, Cape Verde Islands, or possibly the Azores, I'm assuming that the same thing would be happening there, because I'm guessing that they're volcanic created islands as well. So again, I'm not skeptical. I just don't want to go into the whole Atlantis thing, because that's it's just not my thing. But I have been doing videos about Kircher, and so it would be remiss of me not to include his work in there, especially to do with the geology, and again, which would be a bit ahead of the curve of the molten core and stuff like that there in his work, the Subterranean World, and again, these same related to the series I've been doing recently, but. Yeah, Hermes, Mercury, you got the same symbols and emblems, but also, so if you want to look into it a little bit further, you can find these things, and I'll put the links to Ingomar 200 channel in there, because they're interesting. So all these ancient and modern tsunamis created by especially landslips, and just how big they are. So with that, hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.